The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
You know how it is in Vancouver. It's all about Operation Keep Quinn Hughes Around. But honestly, this is starting to get a bit stupid.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks, and also a Canucks writer currently with Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we dive into the show, we got to thank you for tuning in to Locked On Canucks, because it is your Canucks every damn day. And we're not here without you tuning in, and we're also not here without those sponsors, baby. And today's episode, oh baby, is brought to you by Game Time. Go download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Of course, the goal when you're in the NHL is to win the Stanley Cup. And for the Vancouver Canucks, it seems like they're a little bit of a ways away from that. And it feels like the best way for them to win a Stanley Cup is to keep Quinn Hughes around, keep Quinn Hughes happy. But a recent report suggested that the Canucks almost acquired Josh Norris. It has me thinking that, where is this going to end, the keep Quinn Hughes happy train? Because, man, oh man, this proposed deal, I got to say it's probably a good thing that it didn't go through for your Vancouver Canucks. So let's get into it on today's episode. The report that the Canucks almost acquired Josh Norris at the deadline. What was the package? Why is it a good thing that the Canucks did not make this deal? And we'll also get into, is Norris still a target for your Vancouver Canucks? And is Norris actually a better player than Filip Chytil? And the reason we bring up Filip Chytil is because the report from Darren Dreger yesterday suggested that the Canucks nearly acquired Josh Norris at the trade deadline in exchange for Filip Chytil and a draft pick, with the presumption that it would have been the Canucks' first round pick. And man, oh man, if that is true, and take it with a grain of salt, because, you know, these insiders, including Darren Dreger, they've been wrong before. But if that report was true, in my eyes, that would have been a massive overpay for a guy in Josh Norris who, yeah, I know he's Quinn Hughes' best bud. They were college roommates. They think the world of each other, even though Quinn Hughes boarded him into the glass in November when the Canucks played the Senators. Quinn Hughes apologized to him after the game. But man, oh man, that would have been, in my eyes, a terrible deal for your Vancouver Canucks. Again, Josh Norris and Filip Chytil, pretty comparable players overall in my eyes, right? Josh Norris is, you could argue, a bit more established at the NHL level. 91 goals, 158 points in 239 games. He's got a higher points per game rate than Filip Chytil. But if Filip Chytil, the player himself, is not that far off from Josh Norris. And if the Canucks truly almost gave up Chytil and a first-round pick for Josh Norris, who, again, has 4 more years left after this season, paying him almost $8 million. He's had a hell of a time staying healthy over the past couple of seasons. Got into 56 of 82 games this season. Got into 50 of 82 games the season prior and played just 8 games in 2022-23. The dude has missed a ton of time over the past 3 seasons. And reportedly, allegedly, the Canucks almost gave up Filip Chytil and a first-round pick for this player. So I got to say, I'm hitting the applause button, because thank God this didn't happen, man. Thank you, Patrick Allvin, for not making this trade. And you got to wonder, though, if the report is true, are Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford starting to lose it a bit? We saw the panic trade at the trade deadline, getting rid of JT Miller in a hurry when, I've made the argument, and every dayers know they probably should have held on to him, a la Brian Burke and Pavel Bure. You don't just got to ship a guy out for pennies on the dollar because of locker room problems. You can hold on to the asset. And in this case, you would have traded a guy in Chytil and a first-round pick potentially for Josh Norris. Can you imagine what that JT Miller trade tree would have looked like at that point? We're talking JT Miller, 2 first-round picks in exchange for Marcus Pettersson, Josh Norris, and Victor Mancini. That is piss-poor asset management, and it's a good thing it didn't happen. Now, the argument for bringing Josh Norris to Vancouver, and we'll get into on the other side whether or not Josh Norris is even a realistic target for the Vancouver Canucks anymore, because of course he's now with the Buffalo Sabres. But in terms of this deal, again, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense for the Canucks. And let me break it down for you a bit further. Josh Norris versus Filip Chytil. I think that they're pretty close in terms of players. And, like I mentioned, Josh Norris has missed a lot of time. But if you look at the stats over the past 3 seasons, Filip Chytil, he's got a better points per 60 rate. He fires more pucks on net. He creates more rush chances. And we saw that in Vancouver, pretty dynamite off the rush. Just didn't have that necessarily that finishing ability during his time here with the Vancouver Canucks in the 15 games he played. But Josh Norris over the past 3 seasons, he's got 1.34 points per 60. That is a low-end third-line rate. Filip Chytil at 1.91. That's more like a low-end first-line rate. So, again, you're talking about Filip Chytil. I still, in my eyes, if he can stay healthy, I do think that he is a second-line player. I mean, ideally on a cup contender, you have him on your third line, right? But, Filip Chytil has been on a third line for most of his career. I think he can deliver more in bigger minutes if given the opportunity. Josh Norris, on the other hand, look, he competes hard. He's got a great shot. He can win faceoffs. He hits. Like, there are some good attributes to his game. You get him in a good spot in the power play. He can be a guy that snipes at home. Potentially could be a guy that replaces Brock Besser as well. But the consistency, both in terms of his health and his on-ice performance, it just is not there. It's not there. And who knows? Maybe the Quinn Hughes effect, Quinn Hughes could rub off on him, and maybe they could bunk up there in Olympic Village, whatever it is. But Josh Norris in general has not been, worth the $8 million in my opinion, even when he's been on the ice. And again, I still wonder about the validity of this report from Darren Dreger because, man, oh man, Filip Chytil and a first for Josh Norris. Like, we've given a lot of kudos on this show to the Canucks pro scouting department here, right? How they've been able to find guys on the trade market in free agency who have stepped up and been played above expectations for your Vancouver Canucks. With Josh Norris, were they really about to pay a premium? Were they really about to trade away a guy that they just acquired who is, in my eyes, pretty comparable, if not even better than Josh Norris? And attach a pick to that? Again, if that's the case, if this really is true, you know that Quinn Hughes is the secret shadow GM of your Vancouver Canucks. Which, hey, makes sense, man. Which makes sense because we all know if and when Quinn Hughes walks out the door, it is Operation Rebuild in Vancouver. For now, it's Operation Keep Quinn Hughes Happy. But it's hard to argue, aside from the Quinn Hughes factor, that trading Filip Chytil on a pick for Josh Norris would have made this team better. And again, I think the last note here too on Josh Norris is, the fact that he can score goals, and this is a Canucks team that is starved for goals. Not a great playmaker as well. So there's a stylistic fit with the Vancouver Canucks if you could pair him with a guy like Connor Garland. Like, there is a fit for the Canucks there. And Drager in his report also mentioned previous coaching staff, but I feel like it's a bit of the same, but different with Adam Foote now at the helm. Apparently Rick Tocchet really liked Josh Norris, and you can see why. Josh Norris, he plays a good two-way game. He can win faceoffs, but again, the consistency is just not there. And, his on-ice metrics in terms of expected goals against and all that stuff, they don't look too good, but mainly because he's played on some bad hockey teams in Ottawa and with the Buffalo Sabres. But again, I got to say that I'm glad that Patrick Allvin did not make this trade for Josh Norris. But is there still an avenue for the Canucks to acquire Josh Norris here in the offseason? Let's touch on that here on the other side on Locked On Canucks. All right. Before we get back to the program, let's shout out our friends over at Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? You know the answer. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need, baby. Stop struggling to get your job posted on other sites because Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. And man, oh man, you see no Kyle Bowen today. Is he quitting Locked On Canucks? I'm not saying that's the case, but if he did, I'd be on Indeed, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Just like that. Because I know when the pressure's on, every day without that right person is a setback. And that's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. All right. We're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every day. Now we got June 10th today. That means we are pushing 3 weeks until free agency and the NHL draft. And hopefully the hardcore, the real Canuck fans woke up happy today after the Florida Panthers throttled the Edmonton Oilers in Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals. A round of applause for the boys in South Florida. Go Panthers, go. Remember what we say on Locked On Canucks. It's we the South, baby. Man, oh man, I know 90% of the country might be cheering for Edmonton, but that is not the case on this program, and it should not be the case for real Canucks fans. And of course, we'd rather our team be playing in the dance right now, but at least we got those Abbotsford Canucks, and at least we got a potential Josh Norris trade this offseason. Is it still possible that the Canucks could acquire Josh Norris from the Buffalo Sabres? I think it's possible, mainly based on the fact that it's hard to know exactly what Buffalo is going to do, right? A franchise that's missed the playoffs for 14 straight seasons. A franchise that's been consistently spinning their tires, just doing donuts for eternity over there. And honestly, I was a little surprised they made this trade for Josh Norris in the first place. And that's why with trades, sometimes you just never know how teams value a player. Because when you look at the trade, right, it was Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard-Docker, a youngish depth defenseman, traded to the Buffalo Sabres for Dylan Cousins and a second-round pick. The fact that Buffalo traded Cousins, who I think is a superior player to Josh Norris, and a second-round pick, to me, raised some eyebrows at the time it was made. And you could see it from Ottawa's perspective, even if it was Filip Chytil and a first, why they would have chosen Dylan Cousins and a second. And shoutout Rumour in the comments here saying that we also don't know that it was a first for sure attached. We just know it was a pick. Look, for a deal like this, it would have had to have been a first or a second, right? It could have very well been a second. But if you're looking for comparable deals, it was likely Filip Chytil and a first. And Drager did allude to the fact that it was probably a first or Dylan Cousins in a second. And our friends over at Locked On Senators, I saw they ran a poll today. Which package would you prefer for Dylan Cousins? Or for Josh Norris in general, I should say. Filip Chytil in a first or Cousins in a second. And it was almost 90% of people saying Cousins in a second, which makes sense. Cousins, former 7th overall pick, big body. Oh, yeah, and he stays healthy. And he's got much more potential, I would say, than Filip Chytil, and he's younger too. That trade made a lot more sense for Ottawa than the other proposed deal that the Canucks had on the table for Josh Norris. But again, that's the past. And heading into this offseason, we know that the Vancouver Canucks do have a desperate need to upgrade their center ice position. And, if they could get Josh Norris on this team for the right price, he would be an interesting addition to the Vancouver Canucks. Injuries, they can be cyclical. Look at Josh Norris, for instance. He missed the last month of this season with an oblique injury. Quinn Hughes suffered, of course, a similar injury earlier this season. Another reason for the bros to bond, okay, going through the same thing, boom, bam. But most of Josh Norris's injuries throughout his career have been upper body. The shoulder was the big one that kept him out of most of the 2022-23 season. Look, they had a couple other issues with that shoulder as well. A couple other upper body injuries listed on the injury report. And then he suffers the oblique injury. So the legs are good, man. Based on the injury reports, the legs are good. They're strong. Him and Quinn Hughes probably deadlifting together right now. squatting, getting it all done. The one-legged squats, the Kyle Bowen special. So look, Josh Norris, I mean, there's a chance that he can, of course, stay healthy, right? I think you worry about Filip Chytil more than Josh Norris, just based on the fact that Filip Chytil is dealing with concussions, right? Where it's one hit could end your career. With Josh Norris, of course, there's wear and tear in the body. But if he could rehab and, train the right way, get a little luck on his side, you worry about that. The shoulder issues a little bit less, I would say, than the concussions. But both Josh Norris and Filip Chytil, you watch them play, and they both got some speed in their game. They both also take risks and put themselves in vulnerable positions. Like in a lot of ways, they are very similar players. Like Josh Norris, for instance, when Quinn Hughes boarded him in November this season, it was, Josh Norris turns into the boards. I mean, Quinn Hughes, he's not trying to board his best friend in the boards and cut his face. But that just happened, man, because Josh Norris, again, playing a little recklessly, much like Filip Chytil. But in terms of a potential Norris deal, here are my 2 cents. I am intrigued by the idea of bringing Norris to Vancouver at the right price, even with that contract. I do think he's overpaid, but I do think he can be a second-line center. But the thing is, I also think Filip Chytil can be a second-line center too. And I have a hard time seeing the Buffalo Sabres part with Josh Norris after just giving up Dylan Cousins for him. You give up Dylan Cousins and a second-round pick for Josh Norris, you want at least that in return for Josh Norris if you're going to deal him again. And what do the Canucks have that's comparable to Dylan Cousins in a second? Is it Filip Chytil in a first-round pick? Is a younger guy like Lecker Mackey? I don't see that as a fit for Buffalo because of the amount of smaller young forwards they have on that team. A guy like Tom Willander could be a fit for Buffalo. They have a need for right shot defensemen, but I don't see the Canucks parting with Tom Willander for Josh Norris. And then that brings you back to Elias Pettersson, which to me, that also doesn't really make too much sense either. But right now, I mean, Elias Pettersson, 45 points last season. Like Elias Pettersson and Josh Norris almost at the same points per game average this season, right? Pettersson, what was it? 45 points in 66 games. Josh Norris, 33 points in 53 games. They were right around the same player. And for the Canucks, trading Pettersson for Norris, and let's call it a pick, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now Norris and Chytil, 2 guys who can't stay healthy, are going to be your top 2 centers. Of course, they could do other things at free agency, but those are bad optics. But honestly, I've said this before, and every dayers know, like that. To me, that's Pettersson's value right now. Like you're not getting much more than Josh Norris in a pick out of the Buffalo Sabres if you're trying to acquire Josh Norris, or if you're even trading Elias Pettersson. And the commenters, they take it a one step further. So let's get to a comment here on Locked On Canucks. SK93, he's daydreaming in the comments saying, I wonder how much a package for Norris and Tuck would be. We got to get Quinn Hughes' bestie on the team. Yeah, Alex Tuck last season, what do you have? 36 goals, big body winger, can play on your top line. A ton of value there in Alex Tuck. And like I mentioned, Josh Norris just had, they just traded Dylan Cousins in a second-round pick for him. To get Norris and Tuck out of Buffalo, you're trading a haul. Like in my eyes, like it's probably Willander for Tuck, and then Pettersson for Norris, and then maybe Buffalo attaches some picks to that. But I don't think the Canucks can afford Josh Norris. Never mind Alex Tuck. I think we're dreaming here. Now, of course, we know the 15th overall pick is in play, but Buffalo, again, they don't really need more picks to the stable. They need to start winning some hockey games. They need to start finding guys who could win. And for them, guys like Willander would make sense. Pettersson would make sense. But again, are they willing to trade Norris and Tuck for that? Like, even if they added a Zach Benson to that deal, is that something Canuck fans are happy with? You're still stuck in the same problem where you got not a lot of options down the middle. So if I'm the Vancouver Canucks, I'm probably passing on Josh Norris unless Buffalo does something stupid. Like maybe it's the 15th overall pick for for Josh Norris. If Buffalo's want to do that, like, sign me up. Let's go. Let's get Josh Norris on this hockey team. But aside from that, parting with the Pettersson, parting with the Willander for Josh Norris, or even Alex Tuch for that matter, to me, that's something the Canucks got to stay away from because there's just not great value. You want to be the team that rips off the Buffalo Sabres. You don't want to be the team that gets ripped off by the Buffalo Sabres because when that happens, man, oh man, you go back to being the saddest team in the NHL. All right, let's wrap up the show here on the other side. Some news and notes, some comments to get to here on Locked On Canucks. All right, before we get back to the show, let's shout out our friends over at Game Time. Guess what? There's nothing like playoff hockey, okay? The energy, the rivalries, the nonstop action. And with the Stanley Cup playoffs heating up, there's never been a better time to see it live, and Game Time makes getting in the building fast and affordable. Game Time gives you last-minute ticket deals, zone deals for deep discounts, panoramic seat views, and all-in pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ticket prices often drop the closer you get to puck drop, so you can score big without overpaying. And man, oh man, if I had a few extra bucks in the pocket, and I already don't really care that much for my well-being, but if I had a few extra bucks in the pocket to rock a Panthers jersey to Edmonton for Game 5, chanting "We the South," a big old "We the South" sign. These are the things I dream about. And Game Time, man, oh man, if those deep discounts hit at a certain point, they might make it possible, okay? So whether it's Stanley Cups, sporting events, concerts, theater, whatever it is, make sure you take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Go download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every damn day. And man, oh man, talking about Josh Norris, Quinn Hughes' bestie, cozying up in the dorm room. And now could they be teammates? I think the odds are pretty low. Sorry, Operation Keep Quinn Hughes. I'm all for it. I don't want to lose Quinn Hughes. I'm also not sure if I want to trade Pettersson and Willander for Josh Norris and Alex Tuch. Let me know in the comments. Am I crazy? Let me know. Do you think the Canucks should target Josh Norris this offseason? And if so, what is a realistic trade to get Quinn Hughes' bestie out of Buffalo? Let's get to some news and notes and some comments here. Now, one of the pieces of news and notes I wanted to get to was the draft. Okay, we haven't talked a whole lot about the draft here on Locked On Canucks, but wanted to bring up this one report that came out of the Combine. So, of course, the Vancouver Canucks probably looking forward at 15th overall. If they keep the pick, I still think the odds of that are sub 50%. I think the chance that they keep the pick, I'm going to put it at 45% that they make the pick, 55% chance that they trade it. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion because I don't think they're going to deal it just for the sake of dealing it. I think it has to be the right price. But that being said, if they do make the pick, they're likely going to target a center. Now, there was a report from the NHL Combine that the Canucks took out a young center prospect to dinner, and that young center was Braden Coots of the Seattle Thunderbirds, okay? Listed at 5'11", 183 pounds. Plays with a bit of that dog on a bone mentality. Like, he doesn't have the frame to make big hits, but he gets it on the forecheck. He plays physical. He gets to the dirty areas. And he put up some strong numbers on a Seattle team this season that, quite frankly, they were a good team, and he was buried down the depth chart a little bit. He ended up leading the team actually with 63 points, but for the most part, according to reports of Seattle, playing in a third-line role for chunks of the season. But took advantage of increased minutes, got better as the season went on, and also put up 8 points in 6 playoff games for Seattle. Was also a stud for Canada, the U8 teams as well. Captain the team, had 6 goals, 12 points overall. And again, the Canucks apparently like this guy enough to take him out to dinner in good old Gruffalo, New York. So Braden Coots, I mean, he's a guy watching a bit of tape on him. You like the playmaking ability. You like the feistiness to his game. He's a guy that projects as a middle six center, I think at worst, but has a chance certainly to be a top six center just based on his work ethic. And the details in this game seem to be there. And this is what the Canucks have done since taking over, since Patrick Allvin took over. They've targeted guys with high work rate, high IQ, and a little bit of upside. It's seemingly paid off for the Canucks so far. You know, guys like Ty Mueller making an impact. They shot for skill with Jonathan Lecker-Mackey at 15th overall in 2022. Braden Coots would be a bit more of a toolsy player, but certainly a guy that has, you know, pretty good second line potential. He does hail from Sherwood Park, Alberta, the outskirts of Edmonton. And remember, F the Coilers and we the South here on Locked On Canucks. So keep Braden Coots in mind for the NHL draft for your Vancouver Canucks if they keep the pick. One last shout out to a couple Canucks in the Stanley Cup Finals last night. Jonah Gadjevich just laying some fisticuffs on Darnell Nurse, making the dude bleed in what was a crazy line brawl last night. And I really felt bad for a guy like Jonah Gadjevich so far in the Stanley Cup Final because games 1 through 3 of the Cup Final have been a penalty parade, which I think is something Florida probably doesn't want. They probably don't want to have Edmonton on the power play, but they also do want to suck Edmonton out of their game a little bit too, which seemingly has happened, especially in Game 3 last night. But a guy like Jonah Gadjevich barely plays in the first period, honestly barely gets much ice time overall. I got a bit more last night with the game score being impacted. But for him just to make it, to get in a scrap like that against Darnell Nurse in the Stanley Cup Final, a big moment for that dude. And happy to see Jonah Gadjevich try to help out the We the South movement here on Locked On Canucks. Okay, a couple more comments before we get out of here. Again, you're listening to Locked On Canucks. Oh, Greener in the comments, man. I'm giving a round of applause for Green after this one. Greener saying, Quinn ain't leaving. He's a proud, loyal captain. Lots of guys want to play together and don't. Quinn's like a Sidney Crosby. He will die with the team that drafted him. So let's make this team better. Ho, 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 ho. Hey, Greener smoking that West Coast bias for sure, man, because it's 420 somewhere, and it's always 420 here in Vancouver. And look, we're all thinking that it's a possibility that Quinn Hughes is going to leave, right? It's honestly from just kind of gauging the feeling among Canucks Nation here on the pod, talking to Canucks fans, it feels like a lot of us believe that Quinn Hughes leaving is already a foregone conclusion. But maybe we need to think a little bit higher of Quinn Hughes. Because like Green said, I mean, the chance to play with his brothers is going to be there in a couple of years. That's hard to ignore. But there's a lot of cachet with being potentially the first captain in Vancouver Canucks history to bring a Stanley Cup in Vancouver. And Quinn Hughes has the potential to lead the team and be that guy. And look, we'll get into it in the offseason, breaking down the potential line combinations, players who could play together, especially as we get past free agency and get into July and August. But the Canucks, they do have a chance to be better than we think next season. But it's hard to get caught up in that with all the negativity surrounding the Canucks last season and the fact that Jim Rutherford just threw gasoline on a non-existent fire. And there's a little flame flicker in there, but he doused it in Axe body spray and gasoline. By the way, anyone still using Axe body spray, man? This is like something out of 2008. But anyways, maybe Greener's right. Maybe Quinn Hughes is going to stick around in Vancouver for the rest of his career, because if the Canucks had their way, if this fan base had their way, Quinn Hughes would be in Vancouver for the next 15 years, retiring in the 2040 season. I certainly hope that's the case with Quinn Hughes. And like Greener's saying, let's have Operation Make This Team Better. Operation Ignore Josh Norris, because Filip Chytil might just be even better than Josh Norris. Again, I still believe a little increased opportunity. Filip Chytil, increased opportunity, some injury luck, put the two together. I still think Filip Chytil can, be a 50 to 60 point player. potentially even on the wing if they boost their center depth. But I think Filip Chytil, you slot him into your third line, but he definitely has second line potential for your Vancouver Canucks. Boom, bam. That's the positivity. And that is another episode of Locked On Canucks. I'm Trevor Beggs. Appreciate you tuning in. If you like what we're doing, go share the pod with your friends, okay? Spread the word, okay? It's not all doom and gloom here in Vancouver. Keeping it real, keeping it light, keeping it silly here on Locked On Canucks. I'm Trevor Beggs. My co-host Kyle Bowen, not here today, but we love that guy. One love to Kyle and one love to you for tuning into this episode of Locked On Canucks.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.